and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Shanna Fold, here with ILTV's Morning Brief.
2 elections and months of negotiations have passed, yet Israel's worst political fears are creeping ever closer. Blue and White Party leader Benny Gantz has failed in his mandate to form a coalition following incumbent Prime Minister Netanyahu's first attempt. And now, for the first time in Israel's history, the nation's new Knesset has just 21 days to prevent a landmark third election. But in announcing his failure Wednesday night, Gantz is blasting Netanyahu and his right-wing bloc for tanking the negotiations. He says he asked the prime minister to conduct talks, but was met with insults, slander, and childish videos. Gantz also alleges that Netanyahu's interests are more focused on saving himself from indictments than they are on serving the country. That being said, Gantz is still promising to continue working toward a unity coalition in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, Netanyahu is similarly inviting Gantz to discuss a unity government without preconditions. At the same time, he's attacking Gantz for trying to spin his own failure. The prime minister goes on to explain how, for the sake of security and the will of the Israeli people, a unity must be formed as soon as possible. But just in case, Netanyahu's Likud party is also preparing for an eventuality where the country is sucked back into a vote. The Likud Central Committee is convening December 5th to vote on canceling primary elections for leadership and party listings so that if third elections are called, the Likud will continue as is with Netanyahu at the helm. The last time Netanyahu was challenged for Likud leadership was in 2014. After a decade of support and voting for pro-Israel issues, it looks like Canada is now joining 165 other nations by voting yes to a Palestinian state at the UNGA's third committee. But in the past, both Liberal and Conservative Canadian parliaments have voted against this resolution, which calls for an end to Israeli occupation and for contiguous, or uninterrupted by Israeli land, preservation of all occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem. Until now, Canadian governments have agreed that such a unilateral measure would be counterproductive to direct negotiations, and it's not yet clear what prompted the unexpected shift in foreign policy. Meanwhile, the student union at the University of Toronto is issuing an apology after the campus Hillel, an international Jewish student group, asked for kosher food to be made available on campus, and the student union refused. But it wasn't just that the student union said no. It's because the organization said it couldn't support the campaign for kosher food because the Hillel has conducted pro-Israel activities. And Hillel responded saying the attempt to conflate the needs of the observant Jewish students with support of the Jewish state is a blatant attempt at marginalizing Jews on campus. Well, the student union issued an apology for, quote, unintentionally causing harm to the university's Jewish community. But looking back, it's not surprising, as the student union supported the BDS movement against Israel in 2012. In other news, according to a shocking new report, 1 in 4 Europeans holds anti-Semitic beliefs, and that number is on the rise, especially in Western Europe. The New York-based Anti-Defamation League pulled 14 countries throughout Europe for the survey, and the countries most hostile to Jews include Poland, Ukraine, and Hungary. As if to prove the point, Monday, a 76-year-old man in Berlin, Germany, was punched in the face by a teenager in an apparent anti-Semitic-inspired hate crime. The young man reportedly blocked the victim's path and asked, "What do you want, you Jew?" before beginning his assault. Thankfully, a 29-year-old passerby grabbed the attacker and held him down until police arrived. The 76-year-old man, who isn't actually Jewish, has sustained injuries to his forehead and nose. This follows a similar situation that happened in October in the same district, where a 70-year-old man was berated with anti-Semitic comments and then physically assaulted. Finally, moving to New York, an Orthodox Jewish man was stabbed multiple times yesterday in Muncie while walking to morning prayers at a nearby synagogue. The attack happened before 6 a.m. near the religious center and marks the latest in a series of serious recent attacks. But responding to such attacks and in hopes of curbing the trend, the ADL is launching its No Place for Hate program, and it's doubling its funding in order to spread the word to twice as many schools. Now, the EU may not support Israeli settlements in Judea and Samaria, but it looks like some European countries are still changing their personal tunes regarding Israel and the Palestinian Authority. The Netherlands has now announced that it will be halting all aid to the Palestinian Authority over its pay-for-slay policy, i.e., salaried monthly payments to terrorists and their families for life on a sliding scale that increases depending on the severity of the attack. And according to Israeli media and the Dutch parliament, this decision comes after talks with the PA on the topic failed to reach the desired outcome. But this is far from the first time the PA has been penalized for these stipends. Israel already withholds tax revenues equal to the sum paid to terrorists, and the United States cut most of its funding to the PA through the Taylor Force Act and similar legislation. Also like the U.S., the Dutch parliament's vote to halt aid comes just after another decision that defies EU policy. In a highly controversial ruling earlier this month, the European Union's High Court of Justice has decided that all products made by Jewish Israeli companies in disputed territories must be labeled as such. Neither the EU nor the UN consider these settlements to be legal, but Israeli companies and pro-Israel advocacy groups blast the EU ruling as biased and say it's an endorsement of BDS. Seemingly in response, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced that the U.S. no longer considers Israeli settlements illegal per se, and now the Netherlands is also pushing back against the label law by telling the EU that they'll stamp the Israeli products according to EU law as soon as other conflict areas get the same treatment.
That's all for now, but for more news from Israel, remember to like ILTV on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to us on YouTube. I'm Shanafold, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.